So that's one way to win a Masters, I suppose, on the 18th green. Why not? There were actually some people out there saying Scotty Scheffler should have just eight putted because he could, because he had that big of a lead. He should have just kept missing, just to give people a little bit of a heart attack and just to show, yeah, I got a quadruple or quintuple bogey on the 18, still won. Incredible.
I got to be honest. I was shocked. I had a last Saturday, a little over a week ago, I had one of my good friends on my other program that I host, and he's a golf nut. Like whenever I'm interacting on golf on Twitter, and I only ever tweet like during the four majors, the only time I watch golf. And I love the four majors because I think they're fascinating. There's so much at stake, all of these type of things. And so I asked him, I was like, all right, who are some, like, besides like John Rahm was the favorite, and we went over a couple other betting.
Dustin Johnson, probably.
Yeah, I said, I was like, honestly, give me a name that like someone like me, the casual golf fan. And he's like, I'm telling you, Scotty Scheffler, he's been on fire. He's won 3 tournaments and I literally said, I was like, I'll believe it when I see it. I said that on my show, and he just tweeted at me. He's like, do you believe it? And I was like, all right, yeah, I guess I got to believe it. And it's so true. The dude won this. Look at I got this awesome tweet here. This is from PGA Tour, and it says, players to win 4 times in the PGA Tour season, including a major and a World Golf Championships event. Tiger Woods. That was all those were 99 through 08. And then Scotty Scheffler, what he just went on the run. A run that includes...
Wait, Tiger did that consecutively?
No, he did it in 99, okay. 2000, 2001, 2002. So those are 4 years in a row. And then he did it 05, 06, 07, 08. So he had a break there, 03 and 04.
That's still incredible.
So 2 different 4-year runs. Listen to this, though. 8 weeks ago, Scotty Scheffler had started 70 PGA Tour events. He had 0 wins. Now, he'd made some good money. He was close. He made over $8 million in those 70 starts. And he was ranked number 14th in the world. In the last 8 weeks, he's won 4 times. He's doubled his career earnings. He's up to $17 million, and he's the ranked number 1 in the world master champion. So I said on my radio show this morning, I do a bit called Mark Sports Minute, and my goal with Mark Sports Minute always is to try to like not just read box scores, to say something, because we get a lot of, it's a morning show radio, so you get a lot of, female listeners and people who don't care about sports. Obviously, they're listening for country music or whatever. And my goal with that segment always is to say something, to try to like make something land on a bigger thing, not like, oh, Albert Pujols homered last night. And I read that thing about Scotty Scheffler. I'm like, that's why if you've never heard of this guy, don't feel bad. Yeah. Literally, no one's heard of him up until 8 weeks ago, except for his wife and his family. And the dude's on a historic run, so you gotta give it to him.
It's crazy. I joke around with my friends sometimes about back in I want to say it was 2019, maybe it was 2018 for the Open, and because obviously since it's overseas, those tee times start at like 3 a.m. Well, I was bored. It was 3 a.m. and I was like, I'll watch the first few holes. Why not? I'm not tired yet. And legalized gambling had just become a thing in Illinois. And I hadn't had anything set up, but Shane Lowry teed off.
The Irishman.
And I was just like, you know what if I put like $10 on this guy? He was like plus like 11,000 or something. It was just like a ridiculous odds. And I tried to bet $10 on him, but I couldn't figure it out on my phone. Like, it was taking too much time. It was early in the morning, so I said, screw it, whatever, I'm not going to do it. And then lo and behold, he went on to win it. And I was like, shoot, that $10 could have been like $1,000. It would have been ridiculous.
I had 4 for the majors, and it's one of the reasons I love the majors and you watch them, because it's like I love future bets. But when you have future bet, like at the start of the season, like I future bet the Cubs like over win total. Yeah. I always future bet like the Bears over win total. And I sometimes throw a couple bucks on the Bears, like win a Super Bowl. I did that after the 2018 season, like 2019. You do things like that. But the problem with future bets is then you always takes for forever.
Oh,
like
sure.
the bet.
Yeah.
But with golf tournaments, you future bet on Wednesday, you'll know by Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
And so I always take $20 for the majors. I take 4 golfers. I'm a Brooks guy and I'm a Colin Morikawa guy.
Oh, yeah. He's the
And I
man.
love those 2 American golfers. So I put money on them. And Colin had a nice little run on Sunday. And then I put money on for this one. I put money on Hideki Matsuyama to go back to back because those odds were pretty darn good. I think if he had won at like $5, it would turn into almost like $200. And then I always put money on Tiger if he's playing. So, it keeps it interesting. I wish I would have been in it a little bit more towards the end, but I wasn't betting Scotty Scheffler. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, despite all of his success, it's hard to pick out that one person, especially someone who didn't have a major under their belt. So you feel that they got to cool off at some point. But no, Scotty Scheffler continues to make this run. It's pretty impressive so far. So welcome back, everybody. We're excited for this show. Again, a quick reminder that we will be off next week and be returning for our mock draft episode that we're really excited for. Going to go through the entire first round of the NFL draft. And of course, later that week is the NFL draft that Thursday, the 29th. So a lot to look forward there over the next week or so. But today we'll go through some news and notes, of course. And then a little bit later, we'll do our AFC quarterback rankings.
Yeah.
And since baseball has started, we'll have a little bit fun, throw out a couple baseball names that maybe we think would have been good in the NFL or even would still be good in the NFL right now. So we're going to have some fun with that. But the AFC quarterback rankings, since we know, Mark, as you mentioned or before the show here, we know who the starters are going to be in the AFC. At least we're pretty darn sure who the 16 starters in the AFC are. NFC, not so much. About half the league we're confident in at that point, but there's still a lot to be done. That will be a post-draft deal for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. We were talking about this, and I brought up the AFC. I was like, well, it's the only league where we know right now. We know unless something crazy happens, the 16 teams all have a starter that they will most likely start the season again, unless something crazy happens. The NFC is you have at least a third of the teams. You just have no idea. So once after the draft, we get through the draft, we'll try to use the crystal ball and rank the NFC quarterbacks as well.
We'll try and piece it together for sure. Before we get to that, kind of a somber note to start the show off with, man. Some really gut punching news on Saturday when we found out that Dwayne Haskins, Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback, at just 24 years old, was killed. He was hit by a car on the highway, a dump truck actually on the highway in Florida on his way to the airport to return to Pittsburgh after they were down there with Mitch Trubisky and Pat Freiermuth, some of the receivers just working out and stuff like that. And something happened with his car. He got out on the highway, and we're not really sure of all the details, but obviously tragic, and a guy who was, well on his way to turning things around in terms of his career. There was a lot of positive discussions and positive feedback in terms of, his impact within the locker room and on the field as well. And everyone just talks about how happy he was. I think that's pretty much the sentiment that comes across, regardless of who you hear a testimonial from, that he was always the guy smiling and never had a bad day. So 24 years old, man. I mean, it's tragic regardless of the age, but the age kind of makes it, a little bit more of a gut punch, as I said at the beginning, just to know that he had so much in front of him.
No, I mean, that is the worst part. You separate the athlete from, the human being and his career from, who he was. And you obviously you heard the news, and you immediately think of the family and his wife, and it is heartbreaking. It's tragic. And, then it becomes, and I think this is what's so hard with modern society. And it's one of these things that we all as people need to be better at. Of people jump on and immediately want to start, having takes, or the story becomes, you have a take about someone's take on the story. You know what I mean? As opposed to saying it just sucks that a 24-year-old guy was killed. I mean, anyone, if you're not in retirement age, you're dying too young. I mean, it's a tragic death, but especially for someone that so young. And I mean, I think Dwayne Haskins is one of those, like so many athletes before him that was such a unique, special college athlete. And it just goes to show you the Dwayne Haskins story as far as his career goes, just goes to show you how difficult the NFL is and how difficult professional sports is. It's like anything else. I mean, the Johnny Manziels, people win Heisman trophies. There's even guys like Orion, Leaf. You go back, Jamarcus Russell. I mean, how many quarterbacks? Christian Ponder, the first round picks and guys that just their careers don't go there. But to your point, I think that's what makes this a little extra tragic was that it seemed like Dwayne was really starting to figure out like how to be a professional and really like, hey, a guy like Mitch Trubisky would have been a great person for him to learn from. First round pick. His career didn't exactly go the way you wanted to start as far as like being, the franchise guy for a long, long time, but how to be just a good dude in the locker room to keep getting opportunities, keep having a job and make a lot of money being a career backup or having a chance to spot start and having a really long NFL career. And that adds to the tragicness of this because he definitely seemed like, from all reports, since he'd been in Pittsburgh, to really turn around and it speaks volumes what people have said about him. We don't know him personally, but the people who knew him personally, the Chase Claypool's, his emotional video, and a lot of the response from his teammates, Ohio State and Pittsburgh and Washington teammates alone, just goes to speak volumes. And it is absolutely sad story. And it's one of those things too. It just reminds you that these guys, you see them as larger than life and they're young professionals, but they're human beings just like anything else. And life is, it can be that fragile and that quick. And it's and I think that's part of the reason why we all struggle when you see stuff like this, whether it's a Heath Ledger celebrity death, or it's a weird tragedy of like, why was Dwayne Haskins running on the highway? What's going on? Like, what happened? It reminds you that your own mortality. I think that's part of the humanness to this story. And again, thoughts with his family and try to not have to. You don't have to have a take on the death. Just putting that out there. You don't have to have a take on that. It's really sad. And then if you want to talk about Dwayne Haskins' career as a football player, it starts off that he was a really great college quarterback who had some early struggles in the NFL, but was trying to put things together and really make it a turnaround. But that doesn't define who he was as a person or to his family and anything like that.
Yeah, and it's certainly not how to frame the news in any way. I mean, obviously, like they've already been piled on enough. We don't have to spend much time on it. But Adam Schefter initially tweeted, like the first tweet bringing this news to the public included at the very beginning, he struggled in the NFL to make his way in the NFL. It's like, why is that? Yeah. It's absolutely not necessary. And then Gil Brandt's radio interview was very upsetting to hear from a guy that I've looked up to for many years, in terms of his knowledge in the media and things like that. But I think that tough. And I don't want to try and put words in his mouth or anything like that. But sometimes I think when people don't know what to say, they feel compelled to, like you said, have a take, to find some way to frame something. And that's when you can also get yourself in trouble and say stuff that's ridiculous or silly.
Yeah.
Instead of just,
Schefter needs to know better. Gil Brandt's like a 90-year-old dude, 100%. And they shouldn't be but Schefter's the one, if you want to put a name to it, like he's the one who has to know better, because everyone who follows Adam Schefter, we all are football fans. We all know Dwayne Haskins' career did not turn out the way Dwayne Haskins wanted his career to start. Like we all, who among us is a big football fan who goes, wait, Dwayne Haskins, I thought that dude was the start. Like no one, like obviously, Adam, we all are aware to it. So, and again, then it sucks because Twitter, like I said, the story becomes about Adam Schefter's tweet, not about like, it's just really sad that a young man lost his life in a tragic way, and he leaves behind his family and friends, and he had a lot more left to live and to give probably. And that, as opposed to that being the story. So again, it's just a reminder. It's hard. I think we're still all as human beings trying to figure it out. And we all say dumb things sometimes. We all, don't mean what we say all the time. And it's a good reminder to think before you tweet, think before you say anything.
Yep. Very, very true. Life is fragile. And, he was recently married too. So thoughts out to his, now recent widow, which is highly unfortunate. But I know that as we get closer, I'd love to see something during the draft. Maybe have his widow come and read off the
Pick
Steelers
for
first pick.
Steelers.
That would be awesome.
Ohio State's
Do
honoring him
something.
at the spring game. I know, and I'm
Yep.
sure they'll do something at the beginning of the season. I mean, Dwayne Haskins was great for Ohio State. He beat out Joe Burrow.
Yes.
Urban Meyer was like, we're going, and in the moment, it looked like it made sense. I mean, he led Ohio State to the playoff, and I'm pretty sure they made the playoff with Dwayne Haskins.
They
and,
did.
And he had like a 50 touchdown season. So, yeah.
And what's wild is that, there are still players on Ohio State right now that played with him. That's how how short his that's how young he was into his career as well.
Yeah.
We mentioned only 24 years old, 3 years in the 3 seasons.
Yeah,
there are still guys in that locker room.
And it's true. Very true.
It's crazy. Before we get into our rankings of the quarterbacks and then some other items, let's discuss a quick bit of news as well, Mark, regarding the Deshaun Watson situation, because some news came down from that. Essentially that they're shooting to try and get a trial for July, but it's seeming increasingly unlikely that that's going to happen for all 22 civil lawsuits that he's facing, in which case reports came out over the past week that the trial is likely going to be postponed if they're not able to make it this summer to next March, which would mean that through the duration of the 2022 season, Deshaun Watson wouldn't be involved in any of these lawsuits, at least not being required to be present for any proceedings or a trial. And that has raised now a lot of questions in NFL circles about, well, the NFL still has not handed down any sort of suspension. Is this guy actually going to be playing the whole season and then going to a trial afterwards? It's really confusing. But that's kind of where we stand right now. So it's a lot of, I don't know, it's a lot of question marks, but that's certainly a big development there for the Cleveland Browns. And as you were mentioning, it's before the show as well, that this is essentially, putting more question marks on what the Cleveland Browns were doing and what's going to happen with this whole situation, because now you have another year, and this just keeps dragging out.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting what you just said, and I agree. I think the hardest thing, first of all, to have to comprehend too, is it's not just one trial. He's not just going to trial. It's not just like, one person representing all 22. Like, he's claiming that he didn't do any of this and will fight each individual defendant in a civil case. So, it's going to be a long process. And it's one of the reasons why I've said before, this Cleveland thing, in this move, it just reeked of desperation from Cleveland. And it just, to me, I think is going to be one of these situations that I'm not willing to go out there and put my neck out and think that Cleveland's going to be great and this is all going to work out, because Cleveland's a dysfunctional organization historically. And I think Cleveland's got some good people in place running it now. I like their head coach. I like their young GM. But overall, this is a really, really, really tough situation. The NFL is holding back, waiting. And I think the NFL it's hard. I mean, it's tough. The NFL is trying to learn from their Ray Rice thing. And I think since the Ray Rice incident has been a lot better about it, people always like to go back to the Ray Rice thing, right? Oh, so-and-so got suspended a whole year for gambling, but Ray Rice only got 2. It's like, okay, it's a different NFL now. Like that was the turning point for them, realizing we effed up and we can't do this anymore. We have to we have to be better about punishments. That's the whole commissioner's exempt list and everything comes out. And my thing with this situation is it's just that I think the NFL, while we want them to just deal out the punishment, what's the punishment going to be? I think they're smart in saying, listen, we're not going to suspend him for 6 games. And then it comes out that in all these cases, maybe he's found, guilty in these civil cases or whatever. And now it's like, oh, you only suspended him for 6 games? You know what I mean? Or they don't want to go a whole season and then he's found innocent in all these things. Like, wow, you just wasted 2 years of this guy's career, NFL. You owe him. They're in a tough situation. So I think, like anything, I think they're playing it smart. They're saying, listen, right now he's not been charged. He's not arrested. He hasn't served jail time. He's civil cases are civil cases, and we don't know what the outcomes of these cases are. Once we know the outcomes of the cases, we will obviously react accordingly. And again, the murkiness and the cloudiness to all this, just to me, again, just leads to I just, from a football perspective, I just don't trust Cleveland this year. And I, as of right now, I feel very, very shaky about Watson and how he'll be able to perform in Cleveland as a whole in this whole situation for the Browns.
Yeah, it's a major risk. That's kind of what we talked about from the get-go, and this is what you get when you roll the dice on something as serious and potentially fragile as this type of situation. So it's hard to feel bad for the Cleveland Browns in this situation, but at the same time, I think the Cleveland Browns probably had some legitimate safeguards within this contract. In which case, if something were to happen, that they would be able to get out from almost all of this guaranteed money. So while it was a risk in taking a huge step, not just to your franchise making a big move for the franchise, the financial risk in the short term seemed massive. But it could they could essentially absolve themselves of it should this go south real quick. So I think it's important to remember that too. Is that despite, with NFL contracts, when you get the big flashy numbers, there's a lot of stuff and a lot of red tape. And these are billion-dollar companies that are not going to take on a huge risk without some safeguards as well behind them. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, there is plenty of time for things to change heading into the summer, heading into training camp. If it gets to the point of training camp where we don't hear anything, then it's going to be increasingly likely that he may very well start at the beginning of the year. And but that's kind of a bridge we're going to have to cross as things come closer and more information comes out. But certainly a notable development in league circles over the past week. In terms of some other real tidbits, Mark, we had obviously the free agency period has cooled off. Tyrann Mathieu still not signed. Jarvis Landry still not signed. OBJ.
Yeah. These are guys that I think they want bigger money than they're getting offered. And I think their agents know teams could get more desperate. You know what I mean? Like they could get more desperate post-draft if they didn't get the safety they wanted. And or they're looking for those maybe 1 year prove it deals in some ways or higher guaranteed money. But again, those teams aren't going to give out that money till they know what they can get in the draft.
Right. But this is almost certainly going to be post draft for these guys at this point.
It does
there's
seem
been
weird.
Plenty of time.
Yeah. It just seems weird that some of these big names, I don't get why someone hasn't made an offer for Jarvis Landry. If you need wide receiver help, Green Bay Packers, like, the dude is maybe his asking price is that ridiculous. I don't know what it is, but that's the type of stuff that does seem weird.
I know that there were some reports that he was looking for somewhere in the 20 million per range, and that is hardcore wide receiver one type of money. And as good of a receiver as he is, and I'm sure he believes that he's a true number one. That hasn't really played out that way in the NFL. He's been great. He's been a phenomenal compliment. I think, Colin Cowherd has compared him to Robert Woods, and I think that's a pretty fair comparison. Like a really talented, good route runner, but isn't going to be like the guy like that. You're going to need other pieces within the receiving core, but I think he's a great piece. If he is actually looking for 20 million per, that's a steep.
I just think he's past his. I just think he's literally now at he's at the last year of his prime. And remember, he's in OBJ's class, right? Like these guys have been in the league since 2013. Like they aren't young pups anymore. Like that's part of my problem with Jarvis Landry paying him that much money. I might give him a 1 year, 17, 18 million if he wants to get close to that 20 million per, and I'll guarantee all that. Fine, come in and produce for me for a year or 2 years, something like that. But I just don't see myself going longer than 3 years for him and Tyrann Mathieu. And those guys, I don't see myself getting that 3 year range and anything close to that much as far as like guarantees go.
Yeah, it's with how much the salary cap goes up, and you have more money to work with, but at the same time, things are fragile, and quarterbacks are
Yeah.
demanding a lot of money. There's just not enough money to spread out if you're not a true elite player, and some of these teams can really handcuff themselves when they get into these situations where they're paying good players elite money, and that could really put you in a bind and a hole for a couple years. One of the signings, and it's one of those that this guy always flies under the radar, but the Ravens re-signing Calais Campbell to a 2-year deal.
Yeah.
The guy is, obviously within the division, he reminds me a lot of Cam Hayward, a guy that's just a massive human, great run defender, workhorse that kind of flies under the radar a lot. But a good signing there for the Ravens, and Calais Campbell likely gonna finish his career there in Baltimore, somewhere that he's fit in well. A $13 million deal or $12.5 million deal for him, and that was pretty much it in terms of the signings.
Yeah.
I certainly can't think of any other notable ones, Mark, that's come out. It's been pretty quiet after that free agent frenzy that was, about a 2-week period there in late March. So
Great for
that's
Calais
kind of
Campbell. I think it makes sense for the Ravens. Makes sense for him. Kind of wind down the last 2 years of his career there. And I think is a Walter Payton Man of the Year winner. He's just one of those, as you said, underrated, but works for their scheme, works for the system. So they got a good deal done. I mean, it's probably a little less than he'd like, but you know what? It comes to it. Take a little, maybe less to stay in a good system and to where you've already been. Why not? I think that's the type of deal that works both ways.
and a legitimate shot to compete for a ring, which is,
Yeah.
that's certainly important. And especially to those guys at the end of their careers. Every time I hear of a Jacksonville Jaguar from the 2016-2017 Jags defense, though, I just can't help but like wonder, man, what the hell happened to
Big
that
Ben.
team? I mean, it was so, yeah, I mean, God, that
Your
was
Steelers blew it.
first off,
That's
the
what I think.
Steelers absolutely blew it. I mean, they let Blake Bortles and company put up
They
50,
almost beat
50
the
burger on
Patriots,
them.
too. They had a
They
special
did.
season.
Yeah. I
A
mean,
special season.
Leonard Fournette had a great year. Blake didn't have to do too much.
No. But he
They ran
scrambled
the
really
ball.
well. He ran the ball well. It just
Yeah.
was one of those weird years. They had a run, man. They had a run.
Gosh, that defense was so good, though. I mean,
It was.
it was just for such a short period of time. When we think of the dominant defenses, the Chicago Bears of the mid 2000s, or even the 2012, 13, 14 defenses were amazing. But there are eras. But Jacksonville didn't even have an era. It was like
1 year.
2 years of amazing play, and then
Yeah.
they all just dissipated after that. Kind of crazy. All right, so as we talked about at the beginning of the show, we wanted to go over the 16 AFC starting quarterbacks. There's probably one or two in there that I think we would project to be starting quarterbacks, but I'm sure we have agreement there. And we'll rank them. And this is tough, obviously, because the majority of the good young quarterbacks are in the AFC. And a couple of them have won Super Bowls, been to Super Bowls, been in the conference championships. So I'm interested to see kind of where our rankings may differ a little bit. I imagine the top end's going to be very similar, but I guess we'll find out. So if you want, I mean,
when we do these rankings, I'll go first. I don't mind going for starting at the top, and we'll just kind of trade off. I'll go one, you go one. I just want to give my mindset in these things. I'm not projecting, I have this guy for the next 3 to 5 years. It's, hey, next year in their situation, you know what I mean? Like projecting out, like they're going to have a better year than the people above, below them.
Who you would want to go into the 2022 season with as your quarterback
if I'm trying to, and I had to win now in that situation in the AFC, and this is it. So number one for me is Mahomes. I don't need to spend time on it. He's number one. He's in that Aaron Rodgers right now category from like 2010 to 2015. You just say him until proven otherwise. He's got the most talent. He's got a great situation, and he's got his head on right. And to me, they should be the favorites still because they have Patrick Mahomes, and he's still to me the most special quarterback in the NFL right now.
Total agreement. We don't have to do much in the way of that. The guy has proven it. He's got himself a Super Bowl already. Very young, super talented. Has changed the entire outlook of a franchise, and that's tough to do.
All right, number two, I'll go Josh Allen. And again, I think I know not had as many, doesn't have Super Bowl wins. He's ahead of guys on this list that have Super Bowl wins or Super Bowl appearances, size, arm strength. And to me, what's so impressive about Josh Allen is even Joe Burrow in his rookie year versus year two, from day one with Joe Burrow, you saw this kind of like moxie specialness that you're like, wow. But Josh Allen, what's so unique about him is he had a really shaky rookie year. And he literally was like a giraffe growing into his body. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and like in a China shop. And to see him now, like the levels of growth, it just goes to show me that there's probably still more to go. And I think Josh Allen is again poised for a really big season. Now, if you're talking about longevity, I am a little worried about Josh Allen longevity. I think he plays a little reckless. He's big. He uses his physicality really well. And for the most part, knocking on all the wood for Josh Allen, and I love him to death, he's avoided those major injuries. And the way he plays football, it worries you a little bit. But I think by far, he's the second best quarterback in the AFC. I think there's the gap between Allen and Mahomes is the same gap between Allen and third place. And then those gaps really tighten up as they go. I think there's still a little bit of separation for me having Allen second. You agree?
I have Allen second as well. I think it's a lot of it has to do with what can you offer as a dynamic player. And that's what the quarterback position has become over the years. And he is that guy that can offer to you on the ground. The big plays, he's massive in that area. The deep ball is phenomenal. His ability to get big scrambles, fourth downs. He's just really good and has been a lot more poised. He's got that number one target now in Stephon Diggs. So I think that's helped him really hone his craft and become even more and more accurate. I think he's the guy that has all of those physical tools, and the mental part of the game has been growing now over the past 2 years. So he's on that upward trajectory. He's absolutely my number two. And look, I mean, it's no coincidence that these were the two in the AFC Championship. Just this past, not this past season, but the season before, and both deep runs in the playoffs as well. So Josh Allen, he's got to be that guy at number two.
Yeah, I agree. All right, moving on to number three. For me, it's Joe Burrow. I know this is probably where the list starts to differ, but as of right now, he's so hot that the streak that he went on last year. And to be honest with you, I will sit here and say, I think that Justin Herbert and Russell Wilson and maybe even Watson and Jackson have more physical gifts and talent than Joe Burrow. But he took the Bengals to the Super Bowl, and he did it by going through Patrick Mahomes. That cannot be left off this list in talking about it. I mean, the dude, I know you're going to look at Herbert and be like, but he's 6'5", he's a rocket arm, and he can run, and he's never been injured. And I get it. I know you'll look at Russell Wilson like, well, he won a Super Bowl, and he throws one of the most pretty deep balls in the league. I mean, he just drops in the receiver's hands. He's so smart. He's got the scramble ability, never been injured. And that's true. And Joe Burrow's had already a totally reconstructed knee. He's not exactly like the biggest, strongest guy in the room. He doesn't like wow you with the physical stuff, but the man is cerebral. He's got zero fear, and he has got an it factor that you just cannot explain. And right now I'm riding with that. I think Joe Burrow is, to me, the third best quarterback in the AFC. If you take the Bengals to the Super Bowl after not being in the playoffs for how many years and not winning a playoff game for how many years, and you go through Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City to do it, and I know the Bengals defense was really good, and Mahomes, you can argue what his own struggles, but Burrow still did that, and he still led his team in that way. And the team played better because they have Joe Burrow. And I think Joe Burrow is one of those guys. It's not just Cincinnati. You drop him in any locker room in the National Football League, every one of those dudes in the locker room's like, we got that guy. Like, they think of him that way. He's got a swagger. He's got a presence. He's built up this kind of a legendary aura around him. And I think that matters. I really do. So I'll make the case. It's my list. I'm putting Burrow 3.
He definitely has that leadership quality that is an intangible thing that's kind of baked into who you are. He's the guy that can lead men into battle. It's what we saw it this past year. He's not number 3 for me though. Russell Wilson still comes in at number 3 for me.
Okay.
And it's not just about history and things like that. And I know that he's had a couple down seasons. I do think that situation has played a huge factor into this. And it's not to say Joe Burrow had a great situation. He obviously had one of the worst offensive lines in the league, but he had some really young, extremely dynamic receivers, really solid run game with a healthy, top 5 running back, and a really quality defense that was fairly underrated throughout the season as well. So that's part of those were the reasons that I'm not ready to put Burrow into that category yet, and maybe I'll regret saying that this next season or even the season after. I think he's a great quarterback. This to me says more about the talent that's in the AFC than it does Burrow's lack of it. But Russell Wilson obviously still has that scramble ability. The leadership is there. The experience and his intelligence, his pre-snap intelligence, elevates him over a lot of the guys on this list, because a lot of the guys, as you kind of alluded to, in terms of just raw physical talent, he used to be the guy that had a lot of that despite his stature. Now, most of the quarterbacks in the AFC have that type of capability, but I think his overall qualities of having, the deep ball, the accuracy, the intelligence, the mobility, and just the general leadership. I mean, gosh, there are few quarterbacks I would trust in 2-minute drill in the fourth quarter in the league, more than Russell Wilson. So those are some of the things that kind of elevated him for me in that regard.
Yeah, Wilson's 4 for me. So you're not far off. It's splitting hairs. Like I mentioned, I think Mahomes and Allen, there's some space. Everyone else, it's really close. The reason I put Burrow over Wilson is I said I think there's a leadership thing and there's a little bit of recency bias. I watched Joe Burrow, and I'm not going to let myself forget that I watched him go into Kansas City, win that game, and have a chance to win the Super Bowl in LA. I mean, they were in that game. It's a competitive game, and Joe Burrow was a large part of that. But Russell Wilson, number 4, I love Russell Wilson. You know me, I'm high on the Russell Wilson train. I think he's going to have a great year this year. I'm very excited to watch him play. And so I'll put Wilson over a lot of guys. Again, think maybe have even more talent, more physical ability. But you're right. The line of scrimmage stuff really comes into play. He's a veteran that gets thrown into the AFC, and he's going to really, really, really make
flourish.
This whole – well, he's going to make the whole conversation a lot more unique.
He is. That's going to be one heck of a division to watch next year. I'll stick in that division, though, with the Denver Broncos and go to the Chargers for number 4 for me with Justin Herbert.
Okay.
And really, it's because of the raw talent, but his leap from year 1 to 2 in terms of his ability to dissect plays, to get off of his first reads, to really, that relationship he was able to connect with Mike Williams this past year, especially the first, 10, 12 games.
Great re-sign, by the way. Underrated re-sign.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, you want to be able to lock those guys up. Yes, he has a lot of talent around him, and I can understand that. I love the raw potential of this guy and how he has realized that potential in such a short period of time. Joe Burrow's a guy that, obviously got hurt, and you can't knock him for that. But even early on, there were some, it was shaky. It was shaky. You're like, give this guy a year, and he'll be really good. Herbert burst onto the scene, man. He was great. Broke the rookie records, shattered Mayfield's, touchdowns record. So Herbert already did that in year 1. Year 2 was even better. They should have gotten to the playoffs, but the overall team wasn't that great. But not for lack of a quarterback. Justin Herbert, number 4 for me, but it wasn't the easiest decision.
All right, so I have Herbert 5, and again, I love everything about Justin Herbert. I have no complaints. I would be so thrilled to have him as my quarterback. I will say this, what I find unique about Herbert is he's the only guy on this list besides Mahomes and Allen who I honestly feel like has the raw tools and makeup to be in that 1 and 2 ranking, to knock one of those two guys off. Burrow, I would say Burrow doesn't have the raw, just physical tools and ability. But if Burrow can win Super Bowls, and Burrow's got almost this Tom Brady-esque type thing that he could eventually get there, because I just think that he's got a leadership quality that Herbert doesn't have that, separates him. And I'm going Herbert above Wilson. I mean, I'm going Burrow above Wilson and Herbert based on actual success and that playoff run and what I've seen him do. I'll be honest, I was very disappointed with the end of the season for the Chargers. And Herbert, as good as he is, he did have a couple stinkers, in the late part of the season where, like, seriously, we're losing to them, and he didn't exactly rise to occasion in some games. But again, his growth potential is insane. He could be a 1 or a 2 on this list in the coming years. Not many other guys on this list I could say that. So I have Herbert 5, but I love Herbert.
Yeah. I didn't, and there's a lot of reasons to. You bring up some good points about the lack of success late in the year, and you definitely have to factor that in. But I would still take him over some of these other guys going into the 2022 season. I still don't have Joe Burrow though for my next guy. That's gonna be Lamar Jackson for me.
Okay.
I know I'm like highly underrating Joe Burrow. Look, I it's not that I think he's overrated. I don't. I mean, I think what he did to elevate a team that had no business being in the Super Bowl before the year started is incredible. I mean, he should be lauded for what he did. I do think that we're starting to, and by we, I mean the royal we, of course. We're starting to already like crown the guy. And yes, it was a wild run, but let's also not forget, it's not like they absolutely just smoked the pants off of the whole AFC on the way to the playoffs and then just absolutely destroyed. I mean, there were some close games that you got to give them credit for pulling out, but those are the types of things that I don't think are as sustainable in terms of you're just going to keep winning these close games. I'm not so sure that that's going to happen. What they did against the Chiefs, amazing. Like, and I'm not saying it's a one-off, but I also have my reservations. Whereas what I see from Jackson is a guy that can every snap, every down is a threat to go to have a touchdown. And in the NFL, you have to have the ability in a tight game to be able to get that 80-yard score and to be able to just absolutely, blow the pants off people. And whereas Burrow's a little bit more of a methodical approach, they got the big plays of the Jamar Chase and such, but Lamar can do it in so many different ways. I would feel more comfortable with him. Even though I will admit you'd be a little bit more worried about an injury with Lamar than you would Burrow.
Listen, again, I have Jackson 6, so I love Lamar Jackson. I'm very high in Lamar Jackson. Very, very small difference between, him and even Burrow on this list, 3 through 6. I think these guys are bunched really, really tight together. I put Jackson at 6 behind the others because, again, I think Jackson, since the MVP year, hasn't lived up to that. I wanted to see him continue to rise like I've seen Allen rise, like I've seen Joe Burrow have a tremendous rise, play in a Super Bowl. Haven't seen that yet from Lamar Jackson. Remember, it was still just a little over a year ago. We were finally happy, like Lamar Jackson won a playoff game. Like, all right, he's not cursed in the playoffs after his first 2 years that in the playoffs that were really bad and they were duds. So I love Lamar Jackson, but if I'm talking about the talent itself, the individual person, I feel a little bit more confident going into the season with Joe Burrow than I do Lamar Jackson as far as not about just winning regular season games, because Lamar Jackson is going to do that for you. But, hey, if I get my team into the dance, I feel a little bit more confident with my team and Joe Burrow because I saw him do it with a Bengals squad that was a playoff team, but not exactly an all-time Super Bowl roster. And I've seen Lamar Jackson with more talent achieve less in the playoffs. So, to me, that's where it comes into ranking. So I have Lamar Jackson 6. Who do you got for 6?
I mean, I'll just say that's fair. I think there are certainly arguments to be had, and I could be swayed and convinced to have Burrow rise up a couple
These guys are
spots
all
on the
close.
list, but they
For
are really
3 through
close.
6 are, if you have Burrow, do you have
Yeah,
Burrow
I
6?
have Burrow 6, of
Yeah,
course.
and so
Yeah,
again,
he's right there.
I'm not hating on you, and I don't think you need to spend
No,
time
yeah,
on
yeah.
it. But I think it's just, and I listen, I totally get it. I think it's though what I said before, Mahomes and Allen are separate, and I think there's some space between Mahomes and Allen even. But then 3 through 6 with those guys, Burrow, Wilson, Herbert, Jackson, love all of them. I'd be thrilled if any of them were my quarterback going into the season, and I think you feel the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And Burrow has, you would be extremely happy to have that man under center for you. So, yeah, I mean, you already said pretty much everything that I would say about Burrow, and we've talked about him throughout. So I'll just let it stand there. But yes, number 6 for me, Joe Burrow. And once again, this is such a stacked conference that these guys would probably be number 1, or 2 on the NFC lists.
Yeah, certainly,
A lot of these
certainly.
guys would be in that conversation outside Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady.
Yeah. So number 7, I go Deshaun Watson. And again, this is just based off of talent and what I've seen in the past. Um, I if you're just talking about the player and what he brings to the table, again, he's a guy that could be higher on this list. He is special in that way. There are negatives about Deshaun Watson as the player. Again, I'm just talking about the football player that include that knee and the 2 ACL repairs on that knee. So that is a concern. But I expect, if I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, for my quarterback to be coming in the best shape of his life. He hasn't taken a hit in well over a year. So that's something that you'd have to take into consideration here. I think Watson is that in this 7 spot is a weird for me kind of line of demarcation. 8, 9, and 10 then are their own separate group, and then it's like 11 through 16. It's kind of like I think we're gonna have some probably disagreements here, but I'm not gonna fight for either one. I think there's a clear 6, and then there's 7 with Watson. I gotta see him play football, and then we'll go from there. Is Watson 7 for you too?
Watson is 7 for me.
Yeah.
It's almost like the temperature gauge. Like Mahomes, Allen, Wilson to me are like in the red, like the red hot.
Yeah.
And then really like Herbert, Jackson, Burrow, Watson, all in that orange. And right after Watson here is where we're like starting to really get into the quick dissolve from like yellow to blue to, the cooler colors, because it really does start to just like fall off. And a lot of these guys coming up are lumped in together, I think, in a lot of ways. At like the top, they could be really interchangeable. But I think this is a good line. I think I agree. And maybe my next guy, which we'll talk about in a second too. I think after the next guy is really where I start to see that kind of big dip. But
yeah,
Watson, for the like I mentioned, you have to value the dynamic abilities. He certainly has that. Especially behind the line of scrimmage. I mean, his ability to get out of routine sacks, make plays on the fly. The knock on him and maybe why he's at this point and not, up there with like the Jackson is just the accuracy issues that he has had and that have plagued him. He's kind of lived by the sword, died by the sword as well. So those are the areas, if he can, actually improve the accuracy part, then as you mentioned, he could really rise up to the top of that one.
Hold on a second.
Sure,
Hold on
absolutely.
1 second. Do you is there something, it's like an emergency? Okay. Can we pause here 1 second real quick?
Sure can. Yeah.
I assume this is where you're going as well, because I think this is where you see it. Derek Carr is the perfect, there's 16 quarterbacks. He's the perfect, like the top of that second group. He can go toe to toe with anyone above him on any given day. We've seen him beat Mahomes in Kansas City. Like, he can go toe to toe, but consistently through the season, there are 7 guys I would have above him. But I would definitely want him going into next season above the 7 guys below him or whoever. I think it's pretty obvious to say that. And Derek Carr is another guy, again, if he got moved to the NFC, he's immediately in the top 4 or 5 of this list and probably competing for an NFC championship, depending on what team he gets put on. He's in the AFC. He's the 4th best quarterback in his division, and that puts him 8th on the list. It's just insane to think about.
He's the best bottom quarterback in their division, probably of all time. Like,
Oh yeah,
it's just unbelievable.
I would say I'd say probably that's 100% true.
Yeah, it's he's that guy that relatively consistent passer rating. He is 8 for me as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so we definitely agree on that front. He's right there in that window. He's a fairly consistent guy. He's going to get you that good passer rating. It's just you don't often get the great huge wins that you expect over his career. Now he hasn't had a great supporting cast for much of his career, and that's unfortunate. But he hasn't been able to elevate to the point where he's got the playoff wins under his belt, and he's got a couple deep runs. Just doesn't have that yet. And so you think his ceiling is capped a little bit at that regard. So that puts him in this middle tier, but still a very elite group in the AFC, and he's certainly in good company with them. My next guy is kind of where it drops off. And
Are you going to 9?
I'm going to 9. Matt Ryan is that for me. And this was a little bit tough because obviously Matt Ryan is at the very tail end of his career. But I think what he does bring in terms of stability is something to be desired going into the 2022 season. And with a lot of volatility that some of these other playmakers have, there's something to like about a stable presence that's not going to throw the game-ending interception.
Yeah.
And who could still put up numbers and make good decisions in the pocket. He just can't run very well. But I think in terms of the contemporaries below him in the list, I just trust him more. And really that's about all I can say in terms of why I put him ahead of them, is that there's that trust element there. And I think that's something to be valued.
So I'm going to go with number 9. I'm going to go Ryan Tannehill above Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's my number 10. So I'll go 9, 10 them because I think they're fairly interchangeable. For me, I like that Tannehill's still more mobile. He's still in more of the meat of his career, not the tail end of his career. I think he's still a very accurate quarterback. He doesn't turn the ball over. And I think Ryan Tannehill's poised to have a good year, bounce back year. I didn't like the Julio Jones and the pressure of that move. And I think Ryan Tannehill have a healthy Derrick Henry, and he'll play really well. I don't think, again, this isn't for the next 10 years or the next 5 years, because there is a lot of guys on this list I would rather have above Ryan Tannehill for the next 4 years. There's a lot of upside with some of these, second-year quarterbacks. But for next year, playing well and trying to win games and to get my team into the playoffs, I'm going to go Tannehill and then Matt Ryan 10. Matt Ryan, for me, very similar. I just don't have the mobility. And with Matt Ryan, I don't know if I have the arm strength anymore to compete outdoors consistently. If you're a dome team, Matt Ryan over Ryan Tannehill, I could really get behind that. You got 80-year games.
Well, but he is a dome. He isn't a dome.
No, I know, but in this scenario, we're not like, you know what I mean? In this scenario, it's more like, you're picking your guy just to go for it.
Okay, yeah.
I just think, and in the playoffs, cold weather, outdoors, I'll take Tannehill slightly above Ryan. So Ryan's my 10. Who's your 10?
Trevor Lawrence is my 10.
Okay.
And I believe a lot in the growth that we saw from the beginning of the year. Like, you have to think, okay, obviously, I think towards probably the last month of the season, we saw some real good flashes of what Trevor Lawrence could do.
Yes.
Some really big boy throws.
Post Urban Meyer.
To think about what he had to deal with in a rookie year, being the savior of a franchise, having an absolute dumpster fire of a coach, then having an interim coach, having to step up. I just think the growth we saw from the beginning of the year, it felt like a 10-year gap went by, and just the turmoil and just the stuff that they went through with the adversity. I saw so much growth. I can't wait to see what year 2 brings for Trevor Lawrence. And I think the mobility, the accuracy that improved that we saw at the end of the season, the obvious arm strength, I will take that to the bank over a Tannehill who has now been regressing and whose previous season worries me a little bit going into this next year. I'm more confident going with a clear ascending talent in Lawrence than someone who has proven to do well in the past that last year seemed to take a big dip down. So that's why Lawrence elevates himself into this spot for me.
Very fair. I have Lawrence at 11, so we're not far off. We're not far off there. You have him 10. I have him 11. I think very highly of
Lawrence
Trevor
and
Lawrence.
Olivier.
Yeah, I like that.
Bad
Lawrence
joke.
Olivier. I think Lawrence is the best of that young group of people here. Where you have a lot of young quarterbacks here left on the list of the projected starters, and he does have the most upside for sure. And I think he has the ability to have a Josh Allen type leap. Josh Allen's first year, you kept saying, man, physically I love him, and like he can run the football, but he just plays wild at times and turns the ball over and feel like he just needs blinders on. And I think Trevor Lawrence is going to get that this year. So very high on Trevor Lawrence. I'll have him at 11. Who do you have at 11?
So 11 for me is Ryan Tannehill. So
Yeah.
they're just a swap there, and that's still because obviously he's a guy that has that mobility, still has proven to win and manage games well, and doesn't absolutely kill you in the turnover department. So a lot of what he brings to the table from a leadership aspect as well. You know, he's never really gotten the credit he deserves in that front, and what he was able to do with a struggling Miami franchise for years. So I give him the nod over a lot of these younger guys that maybe have a higher ceiling, of course, at this point, but goes back to kind of what I said about Matt Ryan. You would trust Tannehill more in some of these situations than a Trubisky, if you will, or like a Davis Mills or something like that.
Totally. All right. I go on to number 12 for me, and that is Mitchell Trubisky. I think if I'm trying to win games and be competitive next year, of the people left on this list, I trust Mitchell Trubisky over the other four names for next year, especially. Again, he's a person who we haven't. It's weird. He's been in the playoffs twice. He's had flashes of some really good games. He's mobile. He's had some injury concerns, but we haven't seen him away from Matt Nagy. And now we can objectively say Matt Nagy's offense has been kind of ridiculed from league circles the last couple of years of just being not as creative, very predictable, very conservative, and not unleashing talent, more about the system than the talent. So I'm very excited to see where Mitchell goes. I think Mitchell is the guy on this list that has a lot to gain from having a big year, a lot to gain. He's not Allen. He's not Mahomes. He's not Lawrence, where he's got the physical tools that are going to wow you. But he's a guy who could have still a really long career and start a lot of football games left for a couple teams and help them out and when they're in tricky situations. So he deserves, I think, to be 12 on this list.
Well, I certainly hope you're right for the Steelers' sake. I'm not as confident going into next year about him as I am about Mac Jones. So that's why I have Mac Jones here. And, his poise for a rookie was, something to be lauded throughout the year. Obviously is able to make a run with a team that, the year before was just a real dumpster fire. So what Mac Jones was able to do in a rookie year with a lot of limitations, not only in terms of his game, but limitations around him with the talent he had, that certainly elevated him in my thought. And I think we've talked about this before. I think he's much closer to a ceiling already. And maybe a Trubisky can still break through and have some of those wow moments in games that Mac Jones won't have. But when I'm weighing the risk versus stability, Mac Jones, I'd just rather go with that.
I get it. I have Mac Jones 13, so he's not too far behind. It's very close. I think for me, as far as just next year, in another year or two, like as Mac Jones progresses, obviously he's got a new offensive coordinator this year. If Mac Jones progresses in Bill Belichick's system, he can move up on this list. He could get to that. He has the potential to get into that 8 spot and really, I think, be competing for that level of like, hey, no, I'm the leader of that next group. But until I really see it, that's to me his ceiling. And certainly I think that's still a higher ceiling than where Mitchell could be. Because I think once you're a first round pick and you leave your first team, you're tarnished. Like, you're never going to be, even if Mitchell's going to have to go on an incredible run to really be committed as a starter for the next couple years. And even then, people will always question it. Mac Jones, because he's in a great situation, has a chance to still have a higher ceiling, and he's got the best coach in NFL history going with him. So I have him at 13. Who do you have at 13? Mitch?
Yeah, I have Mitch there.
Yeah, okay.
So, and that's I'm intrigued by his mobility. I'm actually excited about that. And I think what we're going to see going into that is, in this league now, to compete, you have to be able to extend plays in some form or fashion, unless you have an ideal situation around you. So, that obviously is what puts him ahead of like a Tua for me, is because, we haven't seen it from Tua. We've seen Mitch be able to do things. He has a winning record in the league. I mean, like, there's a lot of things that are exciting about him. It's just that we haven't seen it always come to fruition, but we haven't from Tua either. So that's like Tua comes in next for me after
14?
Trubisky at 14. And for all of those reasons I mentioned, he could maybe turn around, surprise us. I'm not convinced of it at this point. I think what we've seen from him, really accurate guy, is good moving laterally, but doesn't go through multiple reads as often as you'd like, doesn't, wow you with the deep ball, and really needs to work within a refined structure to be able to be effective. So, that I want a guy that can at least do something off script every now and then. And if you were to compare him to a Tua or a Mac Jones, Mac Jones doesn't go off script either, but Mac Jones can go to that third level of the read, whereas we haven't seen it yet from Tua.
It would take a lot of convincing for someone to get me to move to. I have Tua at 14 as well. For me to get Tua into that top 11 or higher. You could maybe show me some good stats and make the argument that Tua deserves to be right behind, ahead of Trubisky or Jones on this list. I'm not going to waste too much breath on that. I personally just don't feel that way. But I have Tua at 14. I certainly think Tua, though, deserves to be ahead of the next two guys on this list. I'll finish off my list here for you really quick. And we have the same two names, so in either order. I go Zach Wilson, then Davis Mills.
Okay.
Wilson, I get a little bit more mobility, and I get a little bit more of the, ooh, that was kind of special. I think he's got that. So I will give him that little upside over Davis Mills. But I do think that Davis Mills is a guy, and we talked about his numbers being actually pretty surprisingly good by the end of the year. Listen, he's in the AFC South, so I think he's going to get, besides the Colts defense, none of the other defenses scare me. I think Davis Mills is a guy that could actually put up some decent numbers, but overall translating to, like, is he a winning quarterback who you build around? I just don't know. I don't think that way about Zach Wilson either. I think Zach Wilson is the fourth best quarterback in his division. And it's close. He has the upside to get ahead of Jones and Tua, but he's always going to be staring up at the mountain of a man, the beautiful Josh Allen.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hard for him to ever, I think, break through that ceiling from what I've seen, at least in 1 year.
Yeah, I go Mills and Zach
injuries.
Wilson, but injuries absolutely are a potential factor there. I go Mills then Wilson, but it's super close. Like, I don't have any grand, reason for separating them other than, kind of what I've talked about before. If we're splitting hairs, Wilson's just so off the rails at times to where it's like, man, that would be a headache. That could be a real headache at times when you're dealing with someone that's, throwing just balls up in the air and hoping something sticks. Mills worked well within chaos. A lot better than Wilson did. And so that's that. But of course, the ceiling is much higher, I think, for Wilson. And we may see him take a big leap, but that's where we have him right now.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. I mean, I think overall our lists say the same thing. There's a real gap between 2 and 3. And then there's a real gap between 6 and 7 right now because of Watson. We just don't know. But then that gap between 7 and 8 is also pretty wide. And then really there is a gap between 8 and then 9, 10, 11 are all about the same. And then after that, it is a little bit of a toss-up and a little bit of a pick-em. And I'll just say this. I think the fascinating thing about the AFC is you have to remember, while there is 7 playoff spots, and you said, oh, well, it's easy. You had 7 really solid quarterbacks at the top. Remember, the guy who's ranked 9th, his team was the 1 seed last year. The guy ranked 8th, his team made the playoffs. And we fully expect the guy who I have ranked 12th, you have ranked 13th, and the guy I have ranked 13th and you have ranked 12th in the Steelers and the Patriots to be really competitive this year. Really, really competitive for wild card spots. So as much as we love 1 through 7 as far as the talent goes, I have a feeling one of those guys, at least in that 1 through 7, ain't making the playoffs. It's just not happening. And who's filling that spot? I mean, I can almost guarantee you it's not happening because there's no AFC South teams in the 1 through 7. So there's going to be at least one of them in 1 through 7. Tannehill, Ryan, Lawrence, or Mills will take that playoff spot. So one of those names is going to bump out an Allen, Mahomes, a Burrow, a Wilson, a Herbert, a Jackson, a Watson. So immediately one of them is gone. And then, you never know what happens. You
got to factor in variable change. Something's crazy is going to happen. So yeah, one of these other guys will be there almost.
And
certainly.
that's what's going to make the AFC so fascinating. You could have 2 of those top 7 again, not make the playoffs. And that'll be fascinating to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, we'll be having our playoff pictures pretty, once post-draft comes around, we're probably going to do at some point over the summer kind of a look ahead and a thought about how these playoff seeds will shake out, like our really, really early prediction segment. So I'm looking forward to that. Before we sign off here, Mark, real quick, baseball's back. I think we're really excited to have MLB returning to action. Cubs had a pretty decent weekend to start things off.
Pretty decent. 18 runs in the first series. This team couldn't score runs the last couple of years.
They stranded runners on base like it was nobody's business. They're actually bringing them around this time. So,
it's a beautiful thing.
It's finally nice to see. And like they've got some guys on the bump there. The relief pitching is a little bit of a concern for sure.
Yeah.
But
starting in.
But it's a little bit
if you can hit your score, that's helpful.
Yeah.
So
is there a player you think that would just dominate in the NFL or be a really good NFL player?
Kyle Schwarber.
Yeah, you think he had the stamina?
No, I mean he'd be like your a special teams kind of ace type guy.
All right. Okay.
I love just physically. Also, Vlad Guerrero Jr. Have you seen his bank?
Yeah. What do you think he'd play? What would you put him at? Like tight end? Or like, would you make him a running back like Derrick Henry? He's
got a big. That's all I'm going to say.
No treble.
Aaron Judge would be the only one I thought there, like a tight end.
Yeah,
Aaron
he's
Judge,
a massive
tight end. Or or you could bulk up Rizzo 6'3", put him at guard.
Yeah. I would I would think Shohei would be a really good quarterback. Like
the guy
if I could have Ohtani just throwing rockets back there. If I wanted, I did
he's tall too. He's like 6'4". I mean, he's an athlete. He's huge.
I think he's even tall. I think he might be like closer to 6'5",
6'6".
Yeah. Yeah, he's a big dude, really bulky too. So I think he'd be able to take some of those shots and get right back up. The one throwback, I was thinking Roger Clemens would probably be like the Mike Allstott. Like I would just have Roger Clemens just actually barreling through the goal line.
Yeah, or fades Randy Johnson.
Or you could do
Johnson,
that.
6'11".
Yeah, I had Randy Johnson as I had him down too as a wide receiver. He absolutely would be.
I mean, that's one of those things too. You never got a video of Randy Johnson in his peak when he just threw heaters, like throwing a football. I would love to have seen, did he have any form to throw a football and how fast? Because that dude, oh man, backyard baseball, Randy Johnson, you just loved it. Just throw heaters.
Good times. I love it. I wonder, Mark McGuire would probably be a right guard or like a center.
Well,
see that paying off.
Once he roided up, he definitely could have.
Definitely
edge rusher. He could have edge rushed. Just anger, anger.
Been Max Crosby out there, yeah. For sure.
Not saying that Max Crosby juices. We're not.
No. That's absolutely not. The guy has earned he's earned his Pro Bowl status.
In the podcasting world, as long as you say allegedly, you're good.
Yeah. It's a nice throwaway, and it really helps protect you out there, kids. So that's good stuff. All right. Well, off next week. We're gonna have that this episode, of course, on YouTube as well. If you want to watch the show,
Big
probably be
draft
uploaded
show.
tomorrow.
Big draft show 2 weeks from now.
Big draft show in 2 weeks. So yeah, start getting those pencils out because you're gonna be doing a lot of erasing, and we'll definitely be able to compare those lists coming up pretty soon. So folks at home, try and play along as well. Try and think of what you would do in the first round as we get ready. But I imagine there's gonna be some surprises and quite a few quarterbacks off the list despite the quarterback class coming up. So that'll do it for this time around on the Football Lounge. We'll see y'all here next week.